You want dessert, but you don't want to spend all day making it or in the kitchen cleaning up doing dishes. These desserts are three of our family's most favorite, but also quickest and easiest to clean up after fewest ingredient desserts. So join me as I show you our favorite recipe for classic gluten-free chocolate chip cookies. Our homemade 4-ingredient, if you include salt, peanut butter cups, and classic whipped cream to go on berries. So I'm starting here with our favorite chocolate chip recipe. And this is one that actually was on the Kirkland chocolate chip bag, just on the back of the bag. And we just substitute the King Arthur measure for measure gluten-free flour. And then we also ignore all the instructions about order of adding eggs and butter and creaming sugar and stuff. The key is you need room temperature butter, room temperature eggs, and then you just dump everything in a bowl, stir it with a spoon, and bake it. That's all you have to do. So this recipe, you do bake the cookies at 375 for about 12 minutes. That's a little bit warmer of an oven than I'm used to. I have kind of this thought in my mind that cookies bake at 350, but these get nice and golden brown in my oven at 12 minutes at 375. You might want to check starting at around 10 minutes, but these turn out every single time. My 8th grade son can whip these up. Not that he chooses to cook very often, but sometimes, for instance, for cross country, he'll be in charge of bringing a snack for his team, or there will be a banquet or something, and so I'll say, hey, could you please make some chocolate chip cookies? And this is just one of those super easy recipes. All you need is a 1-cup measure, a tablespoon measuring spoon, and a teaspoon measuring spoon, and then a bowl and a spoon and your ingredients. And these are just such basic ingredients. You know, it's your flour, brown sugar, vanilla, baking soda, salt, chocolate chips, and of course butter. So we normally double a recipe that was on the back of that bag. So we end up with 4 dozen plus 8 kind of generously sized cookies. So I will say that I do like to add the chocolate chips after I've kind of mixed the dough. I feel like it helps it all kind of come together easiest if we have the chocolate chips there, and at the end it's 4 cups chocolate chips. But this is a recipe that everyone seems to love, and my favorite way of doing this is to use a cookie scoop to just put it right onto a parchment lined baking sheet. And sometimes, you know, we just don't need 4 dozen cookies. Sometimes I'm like, well, we'll just bake them all and put them in a container and stick them down in the fridge. But oftentimes what I'll do is I'll scoop them all out onto a plate, chill that plate in the freezer, and then I'll move the frozen cookie dough balls into a Ziploc bag and store it in the freezer. And then whenever we feel like we'd like some fresh chocolate chip cookies, we turn on the oven to 375 and pull however many balls of cookie dough that we want out, put it right on top of that parchment lined baking sheet, and stick them in the oven for around 12 minutes. Sometimes if it's from frozen, you have to add 1 or 2 minutes, so you just got to kind of keep an eye on it. But that's really nice because you get out all the ingredients once, you make a mess once, and then you can have cookies for weeks, you know? And then there's no pressure or, I don't know, temptation or feeling like you're not really fully enjoying the cookies anymore because you've had so many. You know, you can just make them as you want them. What I love about this recipe is that it's so not finicky, and it's one of those great, like, we're having pizza, it's Friday night, and now we all want something sweet, but we're going to start a movie in a few minutes, and I don't want to miss the movie. So I can easily, I think I can make this dough in probably 10 minutes and then start running batches through the oven. So this is definitely one that I hope you try. I'll just leave the recipe down in the description box, but it's an easy one. And of course, we like to dip it in milk. Some of us do. I don't normally do that, but some of my boys like to do that. So, ooey gooey chocolate chip cookies, 10 minutes of active time, and then while you're baking your first batch, you can just go ahead and clean up your kitchen and you're good to go. So next, I'm making our version of peanut butter cups, kind of like Reese cups. So I've got out 12 of the parchment lined, like cupcake liners, and then I poured about 1.5 cups of chocolate chips into a measuring cup, and now I'm adding about half a cup of peanut butter. And that is going to be for the bottom and the top of the peanut butter cup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this in the microwave for 30 seconds, take it out, give it a really good stir, put it back in for about another 30 seconds, and then stir it again. And you'll just repeat this process depending on how powerful your microwave is, until it's nice and smooth. Of course, if you don't have a microwave, but don't want to use one, you could always do this in a glass bowl over barely simmering water on the stove. Just, watch it carefully, but you can definitely use the double boiler method. So while the chocolate chips and the peanut butter are melting, I'm adding, I think, about a cup of peanut butter into this measuring cup. And then I'm going to add a few pinches of salt. This peanut butter is salted, and I'm adding additional salt. I think I ended up doing 2 more pinches after you see this here. So 4 pinches total if you want to be very technical and follow exactly what I'm doing. And then I started with 2 1/4 cup scoops. So I started with a half a cup of powdered sugar, and I stirred that up, and I got kind of a really firm consistency, which was what I was looking for. You want something moldable like Play-Doh. So you just give it a good stir. You want all the powdered sugar to incorporate into the peanut butter, and then you want it to be firm enough that you can shape it into almost like a hockey puck shape, but smaller. And then you'll lay that on top of your base of melted chocolate and peanut butter, that mixture that you saw me making earlier. So I did step away at one point for maybe an hour. So I made a couple of these Reese cups, and then I stepped away. And then when I came back, I noticed that the peanut butter, powdered sugar, salt mixture had gotten softer. So I did add another 1/4 cup of powdered sugar to firm it back up. So you might have to play with it. It really depends on like what brand of peanut butter you're using. I'm using the Kirkland organic natural peanut butter. All it is peanuts and salt. So it is probably a little bit runnier and probably needs a little bit more powdered sugar than if you were using something like Jif. So kind of just expect to use at least a 1/4 cup and up to 3/4 of a cup per your 1 cup of peanut butter. So I've got my melted peanut butter chocolate chip mixture that I stirred until it was smooth, and I'm putting about 1 spoonful on the bottom of my baking cup, and then I'm kind of dropping it a few times on the counter, and that just helps the mixture kind of spread out and evenly cover the bottom. Then I'm taking a pretty generous spoonful of the peanut butter, powdered sugar, salt mixture, and I'm kind of just patting it out into kind of a patty shape. I want it to be a little bit smaller than the baking cup itself, so that there's a little kind of perimeter around the edges of that disc shape for chocolate to go around. And then I'm adding another generous dollop of the chocolate peanut butter melted mixture, and then using the back of my spoon to smooth it out a little bit. And then once I've done that, I'll put it into a muffin pan. So I'll take that cup and I'll stick it right into a muffin pan, and that helps it to have a really nice, like perfectly circular shape. I find if I just put it on a plate or like in a baking dish, they kind of don't have a perfectly circular shape. It doesn't matter, but this makes a dozen my muffin pan has a dozen kind of wells, and it makes a nice shape. So that's what I'll do. I'll just take these cups once they're completely done, stick them in the muffin pan, and then I'll put that whole thing in the fridge and let it set up. Now, if you're impatient, like I often am, I'll stick it in the freezer and they'll be done in like 10 or 15 minutes. But I do always store them in the refrigerator. It makes them so that they're firm enough to handle. They're easy to peel out of the paper liners. And also sometimes it's just nice to get them off of the counter. So I'll just stick them in there. They'll last several days. In terms of freshness, they'll last several days. They probably won't last very long in terms of your family eating them. This is one of the few things that everyone in my family just kind of loves. And so if you have a sweet tooth and you've only got a few ingredients, you're in luck in a few minutes, really, because this comes together very, very quickly. There's some rest time in the refrigerator or the freezer, but the process of actually making them goes really fast, and kids can definitely be involved in this. They like patting out the little patties of peanut butter and powdered sugar, and it really, really, really doesn't have to be neat or precise. Just get them in the rough shape that you want them to be, and then cover it all with a lot of chocolate peanut butter sauce, smooth it out, and it looks really pretty. It kind of settles out in the refrigerator, and I'll often make these ahead, so maybe we're going to have friends over in a couple days, and I'm not planning on going to the grocery store, and I don't have ingredients to make anything elaborate for a dessert. This one is always a crowd pleaser, and I love it because I can make it 3 days ahead, and then I can focus on making the main dish or other snacks and sides closer to the actual event. So if you're like me and you're looking for make-ahead treats that everyone seems to like, this is a great one. And of course, you can experiment with different kinds of chocolate. For instance, my one son was telling me he really prefers it when I make it with milk chocolate chips. I personally prefer it if I use more of a bittersweet chocolate. But here's what I used as semi-sweet chocolate chips. That's what we had on hand. And it must not have bothered anyone too much because it's 2 days later and I think there were like 1 or 2 left. So they're pretty much all gone. Even the 2-year-old likes it. And you can tell that this one is chilled, which is nice because it kind of limits the mess potential, which is always very high with toddlers and chocolate. So she enjoyed one after her nap. I made these during her nap, and she never actually slept, which was unfortunate. But when she got up out of bed in the afternoon, she was ready for a snack, and this was ready and waiting for her. Another thing I like about this recipe is there's very, very minimal cleanup, and you might already have the ingredients on hand, so you don't really have to plan ahead. So one of our third family favorite simple gluten-free desserts is the classic, basic, sweetened vanilla whipped cream served with berries. So I poured about 2 cups of chilled cream into my stand mixer, the bowl of my stand mixer, added about 2 tablespoons of non-fat dry milk, a heaping 1/4 cup of powdered sugar, and I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. So it may seem strange that I added non-fat dry milk powder to our whipped cream. The reason why is because it stabilizes your whipped cream. So there are several methods for stabilizing whipped cream. You can use gelatin. You can use a couple tablespoons of cream cheese, which I also think is delicious because it kind of adds that cheesecakey kind of flavor, just a little hint of it to your whipped cream, but it doesn't alter the texture too much. But my family actually really prefers just the simplicity of flavor of just using the non-fat milk powder. It doesn't add any grittiness. It's still nice and smooth and fluffy. So then I just scoop a little bit onto some frozen blueberries. It's obviously one of our favorite things to have with, fresh strawberries or fresh raspberries. Last summer we grew fresh raspberries and fresh strawberries, and it was super fun to just be able to add it to yogurt or to add some whipped cream and have a dessert. And then this is a trick that I do all the time, which is I just pull out my freezer drawer, I line it with a piece of parchment paper, and then I scoop out dollops of the whipped cream that I've made. And then once they're completely frozen, I'll peel them off the parchment paper and stick them in a Ziploc bag or a container and put it in the freezer. And then whenever we make homemade hot chocolate or like a fancy coffee drink, then we can just pull a little dollop of whipped cream out and then stick it right on top. It's also great if you like have apples that are about to go bad and you decide to make an apple crisp and you don't have vanilla ice cream, then you can just kind of pull out a frozen cloud of whipped cream and put it on top, and it'll slowly kind of melt over your hot fruity dessert. But I love a good vanilla whipped cream. You can use it to frost cakes. You can put it in a piping bag. You can even color it naturally with like a little reduction of like blueberries and sugar that you put through a strainer afterwards, and then drizzle into your whipped cream, and it'll make it like a really deep, vibrant, beautiful, rich, kind of like pinkish, purplish color. And that's really beautiful for frosting cakes. So I get it all onto the parchment paper, then I'll move it into the freezer after I move the tripod and don't crash that freezer door right into it. So I'm just gonna enjoy my delicious dessert. I'm glad that you joined us. I hope that this was inspiring. Sometimes, I don't love to always spend tons of time cooking dessert. I'd rather spend that time with my family. So I hope you give some of these recipes a try.